The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on our call today. My name is Christina Spearman from Transcat, and I'll be your moderator this afternoon. Our webinar topic is Elevated Skin Temperature Screening, How to Get Back to Work Safely. This topic is being presented by Russell Hall from FLIR. Russell Hall is a channel partner manager for FLIR. He has been with FLIR almost 2 years and is a Level 1 certified thermographer. Russell is based out of Wisconsin, but supports Transcat nationally. We expect today's presentation to last roughly 40 minutes, and then we'll answer any questions that you've submitted. During any time during the presentation, you can send questions through the question box to the right in your webinar controls. I also want to mention this webinar is being recorded. Each of you will receive a follow-up email with a link to the recorded webinar and the slides of today's presentation. So at this time, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Russell.
Great, thanks, Christina. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, sounds good.
All right, perfect. Thanks everybody for joining, and thanks for the introduction, Christina and Transcat getting together and hosting this this webinar. So excited to kind of walk you all through FLIR's different solutions and also elevated skin temperature in general. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So a little bit, just a quick agenda. So the FLIR, FLIR and EST progression, what elevated skin temperature has been or elevated body temperature has been over time. The best correlation to core body temperature, how we are actually going to detect this, and then skin and body temperature relationship and variations. So we maybe all learned in 6th grade that people are 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. It's not always the case. And then also our FLIR EST, again, EST stands for elevated skin temperature, our FLIR EST screening solutions and different solutions you can get through Transcat. So a little bit about FLIR, who we are. We're about a $2 billion organization. We have a lot of different divisions for our business. So our traditional handheld predictive preventative maintenance, we have detectors in cars, security cameras, oil and gas, government and defense. So we really play in a lot of different sectors. We're a global organization, and at the core of who FLIR is, we're an infrared detector company. So that's what we make. So we make our cores, and so it's 60% of the products that we sell have a thermal imaging core, a thermal imaging sensor in them. So at the root of it, again, FLIR, we're a sensing company. So a little bit of a PSA, if you will, a little bit of what thermal imaging is and how we use it for detecting elevated skin and body temperature. So first, not all thermal IR cameras are appropriate for EST screening. You want to make sure that you have a camera that has enough resolution, enough power, good spot to distance ratio to really pick up these minute temperature changes. Thermal imaging cameras, they actually provide surface temperature at a standoff distance. And that's why we call it elevated skin temperature. You might see acronyms out there, EBT, for elevated body temperature. We're really not measuring body temperature. So when you use a thermal imaging camera, whether it's a FLIR or otherwise, you can't see through somebody. You can't get their core. You're actually getting their skin temperature. So again, FLIR, the worldwide leader in thermal imaging technology, here to tell you our cameras, nobody else's cameras can get you body temperature. It's going to get you skin temperature. But later on in the presentation, we'll talk about how we make those correlations and how we can still achieve screening and safety for our facilities and our people. And then also, this is not a medical device. So it's a first line of defense, again, because we can't take your actual body temperature, your core body temperature. It's not a medical device, but again, we'll talk about how you use it as a screening tool, how you can have some efficiencies, and then also, if needed, that somebody doesn't pass your screen, then you get them tested with a medical device. So history of FLIR and EST screening. So AGEMA Infrared Systems was born in 1968, and then through some mergers, acquisitions, FLIR was born in 1998. So we've been in business, together for over 50 years. Again, the worldwide leader in thermal imaging technology. In 2003, there was the SARS outbreak. And so at that time, it was more regionally based around the globe. Maybe here in the US, didn't impact us quite as much as it did other places. But we did have solutions at that time that were capable of doing screening. So then in 2004, as we're working through this, we get registered with the FDA. So we got our FDA 510K registration, and we've had that, maintained it, and added products to it since 2004. In 2009, we had the swine flu outbreak, again, H1N1. Again, saw another spike in sales, need for our cameras, our technology. 2014, we had Ebola. And then obviously here in 2020, again, with the coronavirus pandemic, now this one, for at least in my lifetime, this has been the biggest impact of a pandemic for me living here in the U.S., in the Midwest. So now if we just kind of look at 2020 and where we were, what we had, and what we're doing now moving forward. So our traditional predictive and preventative maintenance cameras, so what you see here is like our T530 camera, but any of our EXX, E75, E85, E95, if you're familiar with those cameras, our T530, T540, all of those cameras and above have screening mode built in. So up until this year, up until March when we had coronavirus, 99% of our sales of our thermal imaging cameras were for predictive preventative maintenance. You're going to screen electrical panels. You're going to screen motors, critical motors in a manufacturing facility. You're going to use it for predictive preventative maintenance. And then maybe 1%, 2% would use it for actually screening. That said, all of these cameras have had screening mode built into them. So again, if you bought a camera a year ago, 2 years ago, you bought it for PM work, and it was like, oh, cool, it also has screening mode. Probably never used it, but now you can. So that's nice. Again, since 2004, we've thought about and continued to develop these solutions for times like this. Then in May, after coronavirus, it's here to stay. It's really disrupting life. We made some updates, right? And we're developing more research and design, bringing some updates, so some free updates to your cameras, both current and past cameras. Then in June, just last month, we launched FLIR Screen EST. This is a desktop software, so this is a software that you can purchase and get on your laptop. And in conjunction with your camera, it uses facial recognition. And so you can do these screens, and we'll see a video of this later in the presentation. Then we made another upgrade to our handheld cameras with this on-camera screen EST. So this is a sleeker, faster, better screening mode that is now again available on your handheld devices. In August, so we just announced the other week, we're releasing these new cameras. So now these cameras are specific towards elevated skin temperature screening. So while you have a predictive preventive maintenance camera that might go from -4 degrees Fahrenheit all the way to 2,700 degrees Fahrenheit, well, if you're using this camera for just screening humans, a lot of that is not applicable, right? We just need the temperature range to be around 100 degrees. So these cameras have a temperature range, a narrowed temperature range from like 59 degrees Fahrenheit to 113 degrees Fahrenheit. We also strip out some of the other features and benefits that you might need for predictive maintenance that you don't need for this in order to drive the price down and get a more solution-based product for screening. And then later this fall, we're continuing to bring out some new products. So we're actually going to have another webinar with Transcat later in August. So you might see an invitation for that. And at that time, hopefully we have some more details on some new products, and we'll get you guys up to speed on what those are as well. So traditionally, like a lot of businesses, FLIR, none the different, we look at our customers in different silos, right? If you're manufacturing, entertainment, utility, MRO, anything like that, right? We like to make sense of who our customers are, why they buy the products that they buy. with the environment that we're in today, you can almost throw that out the window. Really, the market is anywhere where there's people congregating. So that doesn't matter if it's a manufacturing facility or an entertainment venue, a security place, a travel transport, schools, right? Any of these environments where more than 10, 20 people are gathering, there's a potential need for screening their temperature and making sure that you're not letting potentially infectious disease carrying people, and that sounds monstrous, but not letting these people come in and get other people sick or put them at risk. So the markets for these that we've seen over the last 4 months since coronavirus poked out its evil head has just been across the board. So we really kind of talk about it as just how we screen people, and it doesn't matter what kind of setting you are in. So the best correlation to core body temperature. So again, we call it EST, elevated skin temperature, and that's because skin temperature is not core temperature. I mentioned it earlier, but our cameras cannot see through you. You can't point it at your chest and say, what's my core body temperature, right? It's like cooking a turkey. We don't have a baster or a thermometer that you just poke into the turkey and you see what if the turkey's ready to be eaten or not. Our cameras are just going to see the surface. So similar on a turkey, it's just going to see what the skin is, what the outside layer is, but that's not going to necessarily be what the core is. So when we're doing these tests, when we're doing these screens, it's important that you're not just looking at the forehead or the person's whole face as a whole and taking an average temperature. That's going to yield you negative results or bad results, because our skin is susceptible to influences. If it's hot outside, if it's cold outside, if you're sweating, if you had a hat on and it's trapping heat on your forehead, things like that. So our skin is susceptible to a lot of these outside environmental influences. So again, when we're talking about it, we're talking skin temperature, not core temperature. But what we found, and what medical professionals and researchers have found, and is now an ISO standard, is that the best correlation to what your core body temperature will be is found right at the canthus of your eye, or right where your tear duct is. So if you see on this image, you can see this gentleman right on either side of his nose, you're getting that hot red spot. And again, that's right where his canthus is. So this is actually an ISO standard that when you're going to be using a thermal imaging camera for screening individuals, you want to be getting the reading from the canthus of their eye. And again, that's important because the canthus of your eye is going to be more consistent. So while your forehead, again, I live in Wisconsin, so in January, February, when I walk outside, my forehead's going to get very cold, right? My ears are going to get very cold. My fingers are going to get very cold, right? Everybody's been in that type of environment. But the canthus of my eyes, the inner core canthus of my eyes, is not going to fluctuate as rapidly with those environmental changes. So that's why we want to look at that area in particular, because it's going to be the most consistent reading and the highest correlation to what our core body temperature actually is. So when we're doing our screens, we want to make sure, because of this fact, that we're doing active screens. So this slide is talking about passive screen versus an active screen. And what a passive screen is when a person maybe isn't really looking at the camera. Maybe you're trying to screen 2, 3, 4, 10 people at a time. People just walking through. It's more passive. You're just passing through. But an active screen is when you're actually looking right at the camera. You have, excuse me. You have a one-to-one relationship, one person being screened at a time with one camera. So one person looking right at the camera. So this is an example, a couple images here of one of my colleagues. His name is Rob, on what a passive versus active screen is and why it's important. So the couple numbers here up here on the top left, this X with the line above it set at 95.5 degrees. That's our average temperature, or our reference temperature. And we'll talk in a little more detail about what that is. And then this icon with a bell, that's our alarm temperature. So that's set at 2 degrees above your average temperature. So 95.5 plus 2 is 97.5. And then this little silhouette of a person, and it's saying 96.3, that's Rob's actual temperature. So inside of this, these four corners here, if you made like a rectangle, and then you see this red crosshair that's right at the bridge of his nose, that's going to be the actual temperature that the camera is reading, the hottest temperature within this box. And so it's 96.3 degrees. So in this setting, you would be looking, or an alarm would go off for anybody that's over 97.5 degrees. So right now, Rob is reading 96.3. Okay, Rob, like, you pass. Come on into work, come on into the grocery store, hop aboard this plane, right? You're safe. But then we can look at, the timestamp. So this is taken May 11th at 12:58. And then the second picture here, May 11th at 12:59. So basically just 1 minute later, right? And so Rob, in this time, he didn't go run a marathon. He didn't go do 100 jumping jacks and push-ups or anything like that. All he did was simply take his hat off, take his glasses off, and now he's looking right at the camera. Now we can see that now he is setting off this alarm. He's at 97.9 degrees. So in the matter of 30 seconds or a minute, he went from 96.3 degrees to 97.9 degrees Fahrenheit, a jump of 1.6 degrees. So did Rob's, inner core temperature or his skin temperature all of a sudden just go up 1.6 degrees? No. All he did was take his glasses off, take his hat off, remove, give a better image of your face and look straight at the camera. And now we see that he's, closer to that 97.9 degrees. So it's important, and when you're doing these tests, and the FDA, similar to the ISO standards, is saying that when you're using this technology, the system should be set up one camera, one person at a time. So you might see some cameras out there, some manufacturers out there promoting, we can screen 5 people at a time or 10 people at a time, or, you don't have to pause, or, any of that stuff. Just be careful. You're not going to be getting the best results when you do tests like that. And ultimately, if, you're buying a camera and you're spending, thousands of dollars on cameras, it's important that you're using them in the right way. Because the system setup is critical for these. So the camera is only going to get you so far. And so in these two images right here, these are FLIR cameras. So again, I'm not knocking the technology, or saying that these are bad cameras, but it's just as important that you have a good system and a good protocol in place when and if you're going to be using thermal imaging cameras. It's similar to buying a Ferrari, without a driver's license, or buying a Ferrari and you don't know how to drive a stick shift, right? Okay, cool, you have a cool car, but you can't back it out of your garage. So what good is that car for you? Why did you just spend all that money? So when we look at these two pictures, there's a little tagline up here. Can you spot the concerns with these two EST screening setups? So here right away in the picture on the left, we see 4 people in this picture frame, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. It looks like 2 males on the left and then a parent carrying a child. This male, maybe this male furthest to the left, you can see that his face is not looking at the camera, right? He's looking away from the camera where he's walking. This person more in the middle, they're kind of looking at the camera. Maybe they're like, hey, I wonder what that thing is. What, it seems interesting, cool, okay, but I'm still strolling my luggage. I'm just going to continue walking. And then you have this parent and child. The child's back is to the camera. Their face is buried in their parents' face, and so we really can't see that child at all. So it's very difficult to take any one of these people's temperature. If we also look at the 2 people that presumably just walked past this station, we see that this gentleman here has glasses on. We could maybe give him the benefit of the doubt that he took his glasses off, but glasses are critical to take off as well, as we saw in Rob's picture earlier. IR detectors hit glass and they bounce right off. So it's like us looking in a mirror. When you're brushing your teeth in the morning and you're looking in the mirror, you see your reflection. IR detectors, and again, this isn't a FLIR thing, it's a thermal imaging thing. IR sensors cannot see through glass. They can't see through eyeglasses, sunglasses, windows, safety goggles. Can't see through any of that. It hits that surface and it bounces off and it gives a reflection. So potentially this gentleman walked through, had his glasses on, probably didn't stop or pause like everybody else. And like we saw with Rob, you know, it's just going to, at that point, take his forehead temperature, which is probably much lower than the inner canthus of his eyes. The image on the right, same type of story, right? There's multiple people in this frame. It looks like a woman has glasses on, so we're not going to be able to see her eyes. And then this gentleman right here, he's not even in focus, right? It looks like a man because it looks like he has a receding hairline, like a lot of us males in our older age tend to get. But I can't make out two eyes. I can't make out a nose. Can't make out a mouth. So this person is out of focus. When your camera is out of focus and when you're trying to scan multiple people at different distances from your camera, you can only have one of those people or one of those distances in focus. When you have somebody out of focus, the camera cannot give an accurate temperature reading because it doesn't know what it's looking at. And so when you have something out of focus, generally the reading is going to be lower than what it actually is. And so again, you're going to have this person potentially pass through because the camera's saying it's lower, but in reality they're not. And so this focus and doing one person at a time is very important. Take the glasses off. All these are important. You know, and think back if you know, if some people on the line that have been married and you had wedding photographer, right? The wedding photographer, they're always making sure that the bride looks good, right? And maybe you had one of those pictures, I know I did, where the bride is standing closer to the photographer and then the groom is standing back in a distance. And just like a visual camera, thermal camera is the same, they can only focus on one thing, right? So it's going to focus on the bride, make sure that she's pretty, make sure that she's smiling, and then in the background, kind of out of focus, but the photographer's doing it a cool way to make it look neat, you see the groom, but you can't really tell if he's smiling. You just kind of see his face, right? You just kind of see his body. So cameras, thermal imaging cameras, visual cameras, they can't focus on two different things at two different distances. And so if you ever have a system set up like that, somebody is going to be getting read incorrectly because the camera cannot decipher both of them at the same time. So one of the most important things is that you take your glasses off, and this is just kind of a fun slide of some different pictures, different color palettes here of this gentleman, and you can see that you can kind of see the reflection, or at least that the eyeglasses here are a lot cooler than the rest of his body or his face or his surroundings. So again, thermal imaging cameras cannot see through eyeglasses. It's very important that we take those glasses off because the inner canthus of the eye, that's going to be your best correlation to body temperature, and that's the temperature measurement we want to get. So let's talk a little bit about skin and body temperature relationship and variations. So we did a couple trials, a couple different tests, you know, and as we're getting more into this year, right, and talking about our solutions and how they work. So healthy skin temperatures can vary. So we did an experiment with about 70 individuals at one of our offices. We took each one of their temperatures, and this is in Celsius. They did this out in Sweden, so they use Celsius as opposed to Fahrenheit. So, and then we just plotted them. So your y-axis here is the temperature, then the x-axis is the amount of people, and everybody getting screened. So we see that everybody kind of fluctuates, right? The highest up to, you know, 35.6 or so degrees, and then the lowest down to about 33.7. So, you know, you might think like a kind of big range, right? We all learned again in 6th grade that everybody's 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, that's not always the case, right? People different, and your skin temperature can be different. But that doesn't mean that, you know, this person that's 35.6 is sick. And also doesn't mean that this person, you know, 33.7 is like way too cold or dead, right? They're not a corpse. They haven't been frozen on ice. It's just that healthy skin temperature can vary. So for Fahrenheit, healthy skin temperature can go, you know, anywhere from, like 92 to 98, 99 degrees for your skin temperature. And again, 92, 93 degrees, obviously that's a lot lower than what we have in our mind of 98.6 degrees, which is our core temperature. Again, skin temperature, core temperature, different. So, but your body temperature can fluctuate based on different things, based on time of day. So, last night was a cool night here in Wisconsin. I had my windows open as I slept to get some fresh air. Got a good 6 hours, 7 hours of sleep last night. And so when I wake up in the morning with, some cool air coming, through my room, the fan blowing, when I wake up in the morning and my body's at rest, my body temperature is going to be a lot cooler, relatively. And then as I wake up, make my coffee, take the dog out, go for a quick walk, anything like that, as I get a little more activity and get out in the sun a little bit, then my body temperature is going to move up a little bit, right? Because we're more active. So your body temperature throughout the day will fluctuate. And then person to person, body temperatures can change, based on activity level, your diet, gender, ethnicity, age. All of these things can play a role in what somebody's body temperature is going to be. So again, they can fluctuate, a few degrees here and there. So after learning some of that, right? Well, okay, so your cameras can't detect body temperature. Okay, so that doesn't sound great. Also, you're saying that people's body temperature is constantly changing, and some people could be higher, some people could be lower. Okay, so how do I find the bad ones, right? So don't lose faith in us yet. We'll go through how our EST screening solutions work. And so the way that we do it is we're interested in a reference temperature, an average temperature. So just like predictive and preventative maintenance, if you use one of our cameras and you've looked at an electrical panel or some fuses or, power lines or, a critical motor in a manufacturing facility, when you're doing these screens, let's take an electrical panel, for instance. When you're doing these screens, you're looking for anomalies. You're looking for something that is hotter than everything else, because once you find that one thing that is hotter than the other fuses around it, then you say, hey, there's a problem here. Everything else is 75 degrees, 80 degrees, and then this one is 120 degrees. Something's wrong. It's getting overloaded. Maybe there's a bad wire. Maybe there's a bad connection. Something's happening that's making this wrong. Or you look at a motor and you got different bearings on it, and one of the bearings is a lot hotter than the other ones. So you say, okay, something's wrong here. Maybe it needs more lubrication. Maybe it's loose. Maybe I got to tighten it up. But you can find that something is wrong by the anomalies. And so again, that's what we're looking for when we're screening humans. We're looking for the anomalies, people above the norm. So the way that we do it is our cameras have built into them this what we call screening mode. And what you're going to do is you're going to have people pass through, and their temperature is going to be taken, just the value. So we're not taking their pictures every time per se, but just their temperature. And then the camera says, okay, I'm going to store that temperature. I'm going to remember that temperature. So we do this with a minimum of 10 people. So Russell goes through. Russell's temperature is 98 degrees. And then Karen goes through, and she's 97.3. And then Sarah goes through, and she's 97.5. And then Bill goes through, and he's 98.2, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You get this sample size. You get these averages. You take these temperatures, and you average them together. The camera does all this for you. So you don't have to pull out a notebook or a calculator and start doing math. The camera will do all this for you. And it says, okay, the average temperature for today, July 15th at 1:30 in the afternoon is 98.2 degrees Fahrenheit. That's our average temperature. And so when you're looking at our screening mode right here, so that average temperature is in this case is 97 degrees, right? The alarm temperature right here is 101. Now we recommend that it's typically 1.8 to 2 degrees Fahrenheit above. So 101 is 4 degrees over. We usually set that deviation at 1.8 to 2 degrees Fahrenheit. And again, you're setting a deviation above your average temperature. So above that 97, the deviation is 4. And then you have your measured temperature. So that's the actual temperature. And then again, in this image, you can see that the camera is reading the hottest right at the corner of his eyes, right at his inner canthus of the eyes. So now when we have somebody that comes through, and then in this case, is 101 degrees or more, they'll set off that alarm. The alarm is both a visible and or an audible alarm that you can set. And so if you have somebody come through that's 101.5, you say, hey, you're hotter than the norm, you're an anomaly, we want to get you checked out. Maybe do additional screening, or maybe they go home and work from home that day. Or if you're in a grocery store, maybe say, hey, sorry, you can't come into this grocery store. What do you need? We'll go pick it up for you. Okay, some bananas, some eggs, a gallon of milk. Why don't you wait outside? We'll go pick that up for you. So those are the anomalies that we're looking for. So the camera gets its average, sets its baseline. You tell the camera a variation above that baseline that is too hot, too warm, a fixed number, 1.8, 1.9, 2 degrees Fahrenheit. And then the camera will let you know, will trigger when somebody is at or above that temperature threshold. So then ultimately what we're looking for is accuracy of the camera, right? And we're looking for those individuals that are setting off the alarm. And then we want to, in some fashion, separate them from the crowd, right? Or give them additional screening. So there's 4 things that can happen. So the signal here at the top, the signal is basically like you actually have a true core body temperature, a true elevated core body temperature. So if that's present and the camera tells you it's present, then that's a hit, right? So you say, okay, yep, in reality, you do have an elevated temperature, and our camera picks you up as an elevated temperature. That's a hit. That's good. You say, all right, this person, you need to go for additional screening, or you need to go home, or whatever you need to do. Your temperature is too hot to come into this facility. And then we have correct rejections. So in reality, right, you are not sick. You do not have an elevated temperature. And as well, the camera gave a response that you did not. So this is a correct rejection. You're not sick. The camera agrees that you're not sick. Then we have false alarms. So the camera will sometimes say, hey, you're above that alarm threshold. Let's get you tested with a medical grade thermometer. Put something under your tongue, see exactly what your core body temperature is. And then that test comes back and it doesn't have, their temperature is normal. Their core body temperature is normal. So in this case, the camera picked up something that set off the alarm, and then we did the further investigation and found out that that person is okay. And then sometimes, it's not 100% foolproof, but we're trying to weed out as many people as we can. But then sometimes you'll have a miss where the camera, the skin temperature just wasn't reading as hot as it was, and this person did have an elevated, core body temperature. So you could have some misses. But you set the parameters correctly. You're running good tests. People taking off their glasses, people pausing, doing one person at a time. You're really going to eliminate a lot of these misses, and you'll have the hits, the correct rejections, and maybe a couple false alarms. So the other thing that's important when you're doing these is the camera stability, right? You're going to need a good camera to run these tests to give you good results, consistent results. So what we did here is an experiment with one of our cameras, and we set this camera in our lab outside of Boston and Nashua, New Hampshire. In our lab, we have the way that we calibrate all of our cameras, the way that thermal imaging cameras are calibrated, is you have a series of what would be called like a black body. You have a series of black bodies, and what a black body is a known reference, a known absolute temperature. So we have them from negative 20 degrees to positive 20 degrees, 100 degrees, 200 degrees, all the way up to 2,000 degrees. It looks like one of those, like an old-fashioned sprinkler. It just kind of goes back and forth. And so what we do with our cameras is we point the camera at the black body. Let's say that's 100 degrees. And then the camera says, hey, I'm seeing this as 100 degrees. We go, okay, good, because you should see that as 100 degrees. Then we point at the one that's 500 degrees. And the camera says, hey, I'm reading something over here that's 500 degrees. And we say, perfect, you should be reading 500 degrees because when I plug this thing into the wall, it heats up to 500 degrees. So similar to, if you're making a tape measure, right? You need something to measure it against, a consistent to make sure that each inch is truly an inch and each foot is truly a foot. We do the same thing. But we use temperature. So we make sure that it's reading all of the correct temperatures across, from -4 degrees to 2,700 degrees or above. So what we did with this test is we took one of our cameras and we pointed it at one of these black bodies. And then we left it there and we left it on for over 14 hours to see how stable our camera was. And so over the course of those 14 hours that this camera was pointing at the black body, we saw that 90% of the measurements, and it plots it, these things are 30 hertz cameras. So you're getting, 30 readings every second. So we're getting thousands and, maybe even millions over the course of 14 hours of data points. And then we plotted that here, and that's what you're seeing on the bottom. So we saw that 90% of our measurements throughout the day were within plus or minus 0.15 degrees Celsius. And so that's the red line. So everything, the two red lines. So everything in between these two red lines was within 0.15 degrees Celsius accurate. And then 99% of the readings were within 0.25 degrees Celsius. So that's the dotted blue line, right? So something here at hour 3, something, it made the camera spike up and it read something, a little hotter than it should be. Then down here, after 8 hours, it read something and it's saying it's a little bit cooler. But again, 99% of the time, we were within that 0.25 degrees Celsius. So that's pretty darn accurate. Let me go here. Also within the cameras, it's important to note within our FLIR cameras is we have something that's called the NUC. It stands for NUC, and this is the Non-Uniform Correction test. So we have, similar to like a black body, it's a controlled temperature setting. There's fans and stuff within your camera that keep we call it like a shutter. It keeps it at a constant temperature, so call it 70 degrees. So every minute or so, and if you've held one of our cameras, you maybe hear every minute or so when you have it on, you hear it click, right? It sounds like a camera shuttering. What that's doing is that's our NUC, that's our non-uniform correction test. So the shutter's in front of the camera, and then the lens says, okay, I see this thing pop down really quick, and it's just like a blink of an eye. And it says, okay, this is 70 degrees. It's supposed to be 70 degrees. If our camera reads that shutter and it says it's 72 degrees, when it should be 70, then the camera automatically corrects itself and says, nope, it's not 72 degrees, it's 70 degrees. You need to, and so it kind of does a self-calibration. So with our stability and with this non-uniform correction that we have built in within all of our cameras remain stable. That's why we can have a stable rating throughout a 14-hour test. Some manufacturers out there that have popped up out of the woodworks lately, bringing elevated skin temperature solutions to the market. Some of them are recommending that you need a black body. So the theory with the black body when you're doing skin testing is you have a camera and you point the camera at a black body, call it 90 degrees, and then you have a person stand next to that black body, and the camera says, okay, I'm reading the black body, and the black body is 90 degrees. And now I'm reading Joe, who's next to the black body, and it's saying that Joe is 98 degrees. Well, that should make you feel warm and fuzzy because the camera is reading this known temperature source of 90, and if it's reading that correctly, then it should read Joe correctly at 98. So that's a theory. That's how these black body setups should work. And a lot of manufacturers are recommending that or requiring that with their setup because their cameras aren't that stable by themselves. So without that known source and without being able to check against it, their cameras are not that stable and they're not confident. And just don't have the quality to do that by themselves. They need something there. Our cameras can work with these black bodies, and they can work fine. And again, it will give you that warm and fuzzy, and our cameras will be accurate to that black body spec. But it is not required because ours are so stable. You don't need that. And then with the black body as well, it's another piece of the puzzle, right? It's another piece of your setup. It's another expense to get a good black body. They're not cheap. They're pretty expensive. It's going to be something else that needs to be plugged in. And then also over time, this is something that will need to get calibrated as well. You won't just buy a black body and it be good for the end of time. These two need calibration, so it adds some complexity. But with the FLIR cameras, they are not required. The camera that you have will be stable. It'll perform its non-uniform corrections to make sure that you have accurate results every time that you do your screening. So just a quick little summary, and then we'll get into some of the actual solutions that we had. So again, or that we have. So FLIR is, the leader in thermal IR EST screening. So not only EST screening, but moreover, thermal imaging technology. The best correlation to core body temperature is the inner corner of the eye or your tear duct. It's imperative that when you're doing these tests, that is the area that you are looking for. That's going to be the most resilient to change and the most consistent and best correlation to your actual body temperature. And then skin and core body temperatures vary by person. We saw some of that. Thermal IR camera measurement stability is critical, right? So we just talked about that as well. And then the FLIR screening solution, again, how we do it is we want to get an average of people's temperature, and then we're looking for outliers above that average. When we see somebody that's above the norm, those are the people that are potentially sick, potentially carrying that infectious disease, whether it be coronavirus or the next thing that comes up in 5 or 10 years. So now we'll get into some of our actual screening solutions. So broke it down into really 3 different groups. And then this is kind of the last couple slides, and then we'll turn it over for some questions. So we have handheld dual purpose. So these are our, I would call them at this point, kind of this day and age, if you will, our traditional cameras, our traditional predictive preventative maintenance cameras. So these have the temperature range from -4 to 2,700 degrees. You can screen your facilities with these, and then they also have the screening mode built into them, right? So it's a dual purpose. You can screen humans in the morning as they come into your facility, and then you can take that camera out of your front lobby and then give it to your facilities maintenance person, and they can do screens throughout your building. These can be connected, mounted on a tripod. So even though they're handheld cameras, when you're doing screening, it's obviously recommended and makes it way easier that you put these on a tripod. The tripod is a universal connection, so any tripod will work. It's a 1/4 by 20 type of bolt and nut connection. And then you can actually add additional features onto these for the latest EST screening capabilities that we've come out with. So if you bought a camera 3 years ago, you can update your camera with the latest and greatest firmware. Then we have our handheld EST. So this is what we just released the other week, and we'll start shipping towards the end of August or beginning of September, but open for order today. So these are EST specific cameras. So again, we're going to remove some of those features and benefits from our predictive maintenance cameras to bring the price down, and because it's not going to be relevant. When we're screening people, right, they're going to be between 92 and 105 degrees. So we don't need as expensive as a temperature range. These kind of apples to apples, if you will, also have a higher resolution, so better resolution, which is going to give you better results. And then again, kind of apples to apples, a lower cost. So the cameras are in the same type of chassis, if you will, or form, fit, and function. We just tweak the inner workings of them. And so again, these are going to be a full-blown EST solution. And then also we have these fixed-mounted cameras. So these are really kind of part of our automation lineup, but these cameras will, again, come very similar to the EST handheld models, with the same sort of inner workings. But now these, could be mounted on a tripod, they could be bracketed on a wall, they have the screening mode, all that, alarming just like the other ones. And then these can actually be integrated into your system. So if you have like a VMS system that you want to integrate these into, you can do that. You can also enable them with, with their IP address. So if you had 4 cameras, let's say, in a facility, and you have a security guard or a guard shack, he could actually plug in, tap into each one of the individual IP addresses and look at each 4 cameras at one time. Right, so just like the monitor that you're looking at right now, you could just split that into 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, right? You just open up different browser tabs, and then you can tap into those different cameras, each one of those unique cameras. So again, more of like a network kind of play with those automation cameras. Here's a video of our, this is a software, so a camera connected to a computer, and then computer connected to a monitor. So this is, again, our FLIR Screen EST desktop software. So this is just a nice visual of how fast this actually works. So we have facial recognition. So I'll play this again. We have facial recognition. So the camera, it has a dual image streaming. So we're streaming both the visual and the thermal image at the same time. So the visual image finds a person's face, draws that box around it, and then the thermal image is instructed to look inside that box, find the canthus of the eyes, and take that hottest temperature measurement. And so then we get that hottest temperature measurement. It takes, a split second, a half of a second. Again, important that you take your glasses off so you present yourself nicely to the camera. Pause for a split second. Boom, you get a green check mark. You're good to go. And then just, again, some last bullet points, so FLIR, we've been in this game, thermal imaging game for over 50 years. When it comes to EST and EBT solutions, we've been in this game for over 15. We have some turnkey solutions, both handheld and fixed. These things are easy to use, rapid to deploy, out of the box, ready to go. You can also integrate them into your system. So again, with those automation cameras, we have global service and training. And then some of our cameras, again, are dual purpose. So if you want to screen people in the morning and machines in the afternoon, you're more than welcome to do that, and you can maximize your investment by purchasing one of those cameras. We are also USA FDA 510 cleared. So again, not all manufacturers can claim that, but we have worked with the FDA. We've submitted all of our cameras. They are FDA approved and cleared to be used for screening humans for elevated skin temperature. So with that, I will open it up, Christina, for questions. Maybe some people have typed in the chat box.
Yeah, thanks, Russell. That was very informative. That concludes our presentation portion of the webinar. We're going to now move to the question and answers. As a reminder, if you want to submit a question, just send it through the question box in your webinar controls. Right. So the first question is, could you use these cameras for heat stress physiological monitoring similar to an ear thermometer?
Sorry, could you repeat that one more time?
Could you use these for heat stress physiological monitoring similar to an ear thermometer?
I would venture to guess no. We haven't talked about that. I'm not particularly familiar with that process. So I could, Christina, I could try and take a note on that, or if you could send me that question and I'll pass that on to my team.
Yes, I will.
Perfect.
Okay, the next one, is the average sample data done automatically, or do you have to manually tell the camera to take the sample data?
Perfect, great question. So, so both. So depending on the camera that you have and the software package that you're going to get, our handheld cameras, if you have a handheld camera, let's say you bought one a year ago, you have to manually take that temperature. There's a button on our handheld cameras. It's called a P button, kind of stands for program, and you use that to program certain settings. But you would, when you're in screening mode, you would have somebody step up, and then you would hit this P button, and it would quickly store that temperature and average it in. Then you'd have the next person walk up, You'd hit that P button, it'd store that temperature and average it in. So you could do that, and you could, let's say you work in an office building and people come in between 7:30 and 8, right? You could scan the first, 10, 15, 20 people, and then once you get a good baseline, once you get that good average, then the next 100 people, 200 people that come through, pending that they're coming through in the next, 30 minutes and not coming from a, drastically different time, or, went from 70 degrees to 90 degrees throughout that time period, you could just use that baseline. With the new cameras that we have, the new EST cameras that we have, those will do it automatically for you. So those, once a person is in that box, it'll automatically store that temperature. So that is a nice upgrade. It's an upgrade that you can get for your traditional predictive preventive maintenance camera. And then it's something that comes standard with the new cameras that'll automatically take those temperature measurements for you. So great question.
Okay, the next one, is there a correlation between core body temperature and the EST readings?
So yes and no. There's not, it's not always, your skin temperature is 2 degrees lower than your core body temperature. So it's not like an exact science like that, but there is a correlation. So the hotter that your skin temperature is, more than likely the hotter that your actual core body temperature is. But it's not clean and pretty, because depending on persons, each individual, it will vary. So we can't just pinpoint an exact temperature. But along those lines, if you're familiar with non-contact IR thermometers, those do have, generally, they'll have something that's called a body temperature mode and a surface temperature mode. And if you play with one of those, and you take it, I actually have one sitting right here next to me. So when I point this thing at my forehead, when I take my surface temperature, when I have my, it's 95.1 degrees. And then when I put it in body mode, I get 98.2. So there are non-contact IR thermometers that they do have an algorithm built in, depending on if you're on surface or body temperature. So they, kind of take a best guess at what it is, but it's not an exact science.
Okay, next one. For the handheld EST models, is there any communications output to let someone know there's an issue? Or does someone, say security personnel, need to watch the screening take place and notice that the tool found a hit?
Sure, great question. So I'll go back to this slide really quick. So, and maybe I went through this a little fast, and I apologize. So yes, the handheld, both the traditional dual purpose and the handheld EST, they do have alarming on them, so both audible and visual. So the visual, it'll turn red. The areas of the person's face that are above the threshold will turn red, and then audible will just give you a beeping sound, like beep, 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 beep. So, and those can be pretty loud. You can adjust the volume, but you can turn it up pretty loud that you can hear it from a good distance. So there is alarming. So one of the, but there's still usually a good value to have a person there, call them an operator, if you will, because somebody could screen themselves without somebody monitoring, right? Somebody screens themselves, they set off the alarm, they say, well, screw it, I'm going into work anyways, or screw it, I'm going to go into this restaurant anyways, right? So there's speed limits on the highway. It says, hey, you can only go 70 miles an hour. I'm one of them. Maybe some of you guys are on this phone or one of them too. I tend to push it to 75 or 78 miles an hour. If I wasn't afraid that there was cops, somewhere tracking me, waiting to give me a ticket, I'd probably be going 100. So humans, kind of left to their own devices, are going to do what they want to do in some scenarios. So there is alarming, but it's still good to have an operator or that security guard or that HR person there, to make sure that they're following the correct protocol if they do set off that alarm.
Okay, thanks. Do you need to be certified to use these cameras, and is there training available?
Excellent question. You do not need to be certified. We do have training available. There's an online course that you can take that's specific to elevated skin temperature, screening. So you can do that. And then also, if you're working with Transcat, like Christina said at the beginning, I support Transcat at a national level. So you can definitely, I'm happy to hop on a 30-minute call, go into a little more depth, or, get you more comfortable with the camera. So, reach out to Transcat, say you want to talk to a FLIR rep, and happy to hop on a call with any one of you guys.
Great. Okay, there's one more question. It looks like this question relates to the 10-person averaged reference temperature. What if a series of people with increasing temperatures come through the line, thus raising the reference baseline, perhaps to the point where the reference temperature is high enough to fail to catch people with fevers? That was a long
Good question. Yep. So yeah, we look for, you're exactly right, we look for a minimum of 10 people. And there's a couple things you can do. One, if you're doing it manually, and somebody is, let's say they seem higher, the first person that comes through and they're set it off at 100 degrees, you can say, okay, I don't want to take that sample, I don't want to store that one in my reading. So you can throw that one out, for lack of a better term. You can say, hey, you're already at 100. I don't have a baseline set yet today, but based on our baseline yesterday of, 98 degrees, 100 seems really high. Right away, maybe you just pull that person out and have them do the additional screening. So you can, on the manual cameras, you can accept or not accept the different temperatures. When you have the automatic ones, they're going to take all the temperatures, they'll screen those in, except for the ones that are too high, except for the ones that are above the alarm. And then with the automatic ones, you're going to be consistently updating that reference, or that average temperature. So even if you have, like a roulette table, right? Even if you have a run of red, 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 eventually you're going to get some blacks that are going to normalize that back down and give you a pretty good average of, everybody in that environment. So you can manually, kind of include or exclude the temperatures that you want. And then if you have the automatic ones, you'll get so many samples that, one high one here or one low one here really isn't going to move your average that drastically.
Okay, I think that was it for the questions. Thank you, Russell. That concludes our time for today. If you have any questions or additionally, or want to find out more about Transcat's product and service offerings, please contact us at 800-828-1470 or on our website at transcat.com. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We hope you got something out of our presentation and that you continue to join us for the future Transcat e-learning webinars. So thank you, Russell, and have a great day, everybody.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.